I'm not blaming the government for Melissa. That would be absurd. I'm not blaming the government for seeking resources to fund the recovery. It's going to be necessary to get those resources. I am just making the point that this is not something to celebrate. This is not something to gloat about. This represents a substantial setback for Jamaica.
We are not celebrating more debt. What we are celebrating is the opportunity to make a massive investment in our infrastructure.
So Prime Minister Andrew Holness received a warning today from Mark Golding, but instantly Prime Minister Andrew Holness did respond. And the warning is about not celebrating the $1 trillion Jamaican dollar that was received for reconstruction. And basically that money that was received, 99% of that money is debt to Jamaica. 99% of the 1 trillion is actually debt. The remaining 1% was actually donated or was given as a grant. So Mark Golding warned Prime Minister Andrew Holness not to celebrate it. Yes, it's necessary, but not to celebrate as he was basically doing. Andrew Holness immediately responded, which I'll be sharing both. So I'll be sharing both videos, but before we get into the details, do me a favor by liking this video. Also, subscribe. That way y'all don't miss out on any of the updates when we post a video.
It is a sad situation in the configuration of the affairs of this world that we, living in a small island developing state like Jamaica, are the recipients of the increasingly vicious effects of the climate crisis, a crisis which we did very little, if anything, to cause. The global warming, as a result of the excessive use of carbon and emissions from carbon fuels over the last few centuries since the Industrial Revolution, that global warming has largely been driven by the wealthy economies of the world. And yet we, in Jamaica and other islands like ourselves, are suffering the consequences of that on an annual basis. We were hit by beryl or scraped by beryl last year. It was a serious hit. And this year we got walloped by Melissa. It's really a shame that the international financial community is still approaching the mitigation of the effects of climate-induced disasters on countries like ours by financing packages that are largely based on additional debt. These debts that we are now going to be incurring to finance our attempts at recovery are like lending money to a business that suffered losses through some kind of crisis that is trying to dig itself out of a hole from. Taking on additional debt to do that is going to be a challenging road for any country. Therefore, I don't think it's appropriate to treat these announcements in a triumphant way. We are going to be incurring the costs of paying back this massive additional borrowing in years to come. We are in a country which has spent the last 15 years seeking to get ourselves out of a debt trap, where we've had to run massive primary surpluses every year consistently to reduce our debt to GDP ratio, with a target that's written into our law incidentally by a government from this side, which we were anticipating would have been met this year before Melissa struck us. And now we are facing a new era of massive incremental borrowing. If you look at 3.6 billion US of sovereign debt, that's over 25% of GDP of additional borrowing. That does, and the 662 billion already available, only less than half of that is in a form that's not debt. Most of that is debt as well. This $2.4 billion of private capital, we look forward to seeing whether that will be forthcoming and in what volumes, because you can't project that you're going to receive private investment as part of your recovery. I'm glad that the multilaterals are going to support the effort, but at the end of the day, investors have to be willing and there have to be projects available to them that are bankable and investable. So we will see whether or not that happens. But the reality is that only 12 million US out of how much? $7 billion is grant funding. Only 12 million US out of over 6 billion of programmed US funding is grant funding. That is the world that we as Jamaicans, both you on that side and us on this side, have to navigate. So while I admire and indeed share optimism about the future, because Jamaica is such a resilient and special country, and we will get through this, I think we should approach an announcement like this with some sobriety, where this event has caused us to retrace our steps substantially from the economic path we were on, and which the nation incurred substantial sacrifices to get to where we were. I'm not blaming the government for Melissa. That would be absurd. I'm not blaming the government for seeking resources to fund the recovery. It's going to be necessary to get those resources. I am just making the point that this is not something to celebrate. This is not something to gloat about. This represents a substantial setback for Jamaica, and it represents if it's not administered properly, it could permanently weaken our future prospects and damage the country's future.
So that was Mark Golden's presentation earlier today in Parliament. And he definitely made some valid points. But this is Prime Minister Andrew Holness' response.
This third phase will focus on resilient considerations. This is the heart of our long-term strategy. Every major investment will reflect stronger engineering, climate-ready design, and future-proofing. This includes resilient housing, rebuilding schools, hospitals, and public buildings to higher resilient standards, including relocating them where necessary. Climate-smart roads and bridges, coastal and river defense systems, including natural defenses. Strengthened public utilities and grid resilience. Digital and transport infrastructure to support productivity. Our reconstruction is not merely about restoring what was lost. It is about building a stronger, more competitive Jamaica capable of withstanding future climate shocks. Madam Speaker, we will approach reconstruction as a growth-inducing strategy. I know from this that the question will be asked, why are we celebrating more debt? We are not celebrating more debt. What we are celebrating is the opportunity to make a massive investment in our infrastructure, in our people, in the services that improve productivity. And it is that investment, Madam Speaker, that will expand our economy relative to our debt And therefore, in short order, you can look forward to growing, increased revenue, and a relatively smaller debt to the size of your economy. We have never before had an opportunity to spend $6.7 billion relative to our GDP. We have never had that opportunity. US. And our GDP is somewhere in the region of about 17 to 18 billion dollars, 19 billion dollars, thereabout. The Minister of Finance reminded me, $20 billion. You are proud, as are we, proud of the fact. Yes, $20 billion. So you get an opportunity to within 3 years to deploy $6.7 billion relative to your $20 billion GDP. So you can see the opportunity to expand the economy. And that's what the strategy is. And I'm encouraging all Jamaicans, regardless of political persuasion, to embrace this opportunity.
All right, so you hear both presentation from Mark Golding and also Prime Minister Andrew Holness. And I believe Mark Golding made some solid points. Likewise, Prime Minister Andrew Holness. It's just that this money that was borrowed, yes, it could definitely revolutionize Jamaica. As Prime Minister Andrew Holness explained, Jamaica has never gotten so much funding to got enough money to spend all at once. So this could definitely bring Jamaica to a different level. Likewise with Mark Golding, if it's not managed properly, then Jamaica could be in some serious trouble. But viewers, feel free to leave your thoughts on this one in the comments.